Should men pay for first dates with women? If you're a woman who wants to find a man to spend your life with, I'm on the side of yes, let him pay. And I didn't used to think that. But life has taught me why this old custom is important, and I'll tell you why. This is my second video in my series on how I stopped playing small, which is a thing that a lot of us do when we're still at the effect of traumatic experiences in the past. We hedge against discomfort and pain by playing small. And this can apply to how big you let your expectations be or your obligations get in a first date experience. And this is true whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're straight or gay, whatever your situation. I invite you to think about the way that you handle the who pays question and how that feels to you when you go one way versus the other, and whether it's supporting what you really want or if you might be playing small. Now, by the way, if you love this topic of playing small and you're not subscribed to my channel yet, I invite you to hit that subscribe button today because we're getting very close to earning 1 million subscriptions. Yes, 1 million subscribers. It's coming. It's in the cards, and it's been kind of slow lately, and I'm hitting you up with this series to go, come on, come subscribe. And when you subscribe, you get a notification about each video in this series the moment it comes out. So thank you for doing that for me. It means a lot. I didn't think I would make it to 1 million, but it's actually, coming into focus now. So I used to insist on paying my share with men. First dates, long-term relationships even. I'd pay my share. And then all the way up into my first marriage, I paid my share. I paid my way. I probably did more than that too, honestly. Well, I know I did. And I was raised to believe that expecting a man to pay for your dinner was like weak and retro for a woman, and that it subjugated you to him as a woman, or it put it into his mind that you now owed him sex. So I don't know if I actually believed any of this, but I think I was always eager to throw down my cash at restaurants because honestly, I was very uncomfortable or even terrified sometimes of facing a potentially awkward moment where I thought he would pay or where I just didn't notice the check on time, it was on the table, but then the man would refuse to pay and I would feel humiliated. And so, there were a lot of emotional stakes in this. There was that expectation in my mind, even though on top of it, I had layered this, no, I always do it because that's the right thing. I always pay my share. So the worst thing I think my fear is that when he would insist that we both pay, it would become probable that in his mind, this was not a date. Like I had thought it was a date and he didn't think it was a date. And that's a lot how we signal each other, right? That's why we do that. We go, oh no, I'll pay my own share. That's, in most circumstances, that's considered a polite way to say, yeah, I don't feel romantically about you. I'm just having coffee or having dinner with you because friends, And honestly, a lot of my early dating experiences were not clearly dates. And what I can tell you now is that these are all boundary issues. It's okay and good to have a friendly check-in before you get together with someone who invites you to do something where you feel confused, what is the meaning of this invitation? And you can say, oh, you mean like a date? You can say that. It's actually not humiliating to do that. And if you say it in a lighthearted way, you're not like throwing these huge stakes into it. It's easy for a person to say, oh, sorry if I came off that way. And then you get to save face if you're disappointed about that. And you can also say, I just wanted to check in, is this something that you're treating me to, or should I plan to pay for part of it myself? Or go Dutch. If you're not a native English speaker, that's an idiom we have. Going Dutch means both people pay equal shares. So this is a good way to handle plans with any kind of friend, really, not even things where you think it's a date. If you're confused about who's going to pay and uncomfortable, is ask at the earliest opportunity. The sooner you do it, the less weird it is. And if you just want to wing it and go with the flow and just see what happens, that's fine. But in this video, I want to talk about a very special get-together, a special kind of get-together, a first date. So when I was insisting on paying for myself, I believed that this was the modern and fair and honorable thing to do. And it can be. And it's okay if that's how any person wants to play their cards in this situation. But I found out much later that insisting on paying was me communicating, I'm not interested in you. even when that's not what I wanted to communicate. So it's a mixed message, right? To act flirty on a date, but insist on paying, it could be confusing for the other person, unless there's words, there's clarity about it. So when I was doing that, insisting on paying, but hoping that the guy was romantically interested in me, I was playing small. I was hedging my bets. I was afraid to get disappointed. And that's exactly how playing small happens. I grew up in the 70s, and my mom taught me that letting a man pay what was subjugation. It was like very old school, very like he's in control. Now you have to do whatever he wants. He decides everything. And she was adamant that men and women should be equal. And I agree with her. I like equality, but that doesn't mean that every situation has to be equal in every way, like cookie cutter housing along the freeway, right? That's always depressing to me. Every situation and every combination of people gets to have a unique chemistry. And a first date is, it's a little bit ritualistic, really. Now you could just like fall into it. That's pretty much what I did in my youth, but it's a little bit ritualistic, and there are just like ancient codes of how we communicate with each other that I think are important now. I think what my mother was advocating for, of equality, don't let yourself be subjugated, it was highly relevant to the social environment when she was young in the 50s and dating. She was born in 1935. So yeah, she probably started dating, throughout the 50s. And, she was married and had a kid by 1956. So those days also had that going on. And I think that was really hard for her. She was a mother by the time she was 21. So I understand where she was coming from to, keep your options open, keep control over your life. She also used to say, don't ever learn to type or you'll just get thrown into the secretary pool. What she didn't know is that computers were coming and that knowing how to type is like really handy for everybody. I did learn to type, and that is where I ended up for a lot of my earlier career, was just in like admin jobs. But I was grateful for the jobs. It was money, it was steady, you could do it as a temp. I was glad to have that skill. And now that I basically write for a living, I have this book, guess what I did? I typed it out. And I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. I know how to type really fast. So my mother taught me, don't ever depend on a man. And even for dinner, you shouldn't depend on him. But yeah, that was her day. And that's exactly how she got trapped and lost her identity for such a long time. So that's a boundary problem. And she couldn't have known back then, really what the long-term implications were when she was just a girl in her early 20s. But it's just what people did. It's how they did it back then. And then later, my mom was kind of part of the extreme hedonistic culture of the hippie years in Berkeley, where we lived when I was little. And I think that was her extreme reaction, her inner backlash to how she was raised, very prim and letting men control everything. And honestly, I think her sort of like, I don't know, she was really into like drugs and alcohol and different guys in the house all the time. And I think that was both the cause and the result, not just of her upbringing, but her alcoholism and drug problems too. So I don't want to read too much into it. But she was an alcoholic and an addict. And a lot of people I know who end up with that problem, there are early signs of it when they're young. But I don't think she liked the role that she was forced to play as a young woman. So telling me never to depend on a man was her trying to help me. And ironically, when I followed her advice, I dated men who were not dependable, insisting on paying my way and often paying for them because, they didn't have jobs or things like that. And so me doing that was how I was playing small. I was actually avoiding something uncomfortable. I wasn't being fair-minded or anything. I was avoiding pain. And yes, this is also very common with those of us who were raised by people with alcoholism and drug problems, dating people who aren't really like capable or on their feet or employed or emotionally available is the most important thing. But I got my experience, and I was 45 years old before I learned the magic power of letting the man pay. And again, if you're not like in a male-female dynamic or you're not looking for marriage, you can just interpret this in a way that applies to you. We all have these roles to play when we, interact with people when there's like a romantic thing in the air. So I was following a conversation online recently around an article on this very question: should men pay for the first dates? And there was this big discussion section. And I was kind of shocked at how many people saw dating is like transactional. It's like, no, he shouldn't pay. Why should he? What's he going to get back? Is she going to pay later, or is he supposed to just shell out all his cash? And I was just sort of surprised how transactional and sort of bitter it sounded. And that may be a product of what kinds of people comment on articles. It's hard to tell. But there was some pretty harsh stuff there, and a few people going, yeah, I think a man should pay. So I weighed in and I said, oh, well, I'm a YouTuber. I give advice to people in relationships. And I didn't used to think this, but now I think, I think there's this really special function that the man paying early in the relationship, certainly the first date, it is a filter of a sort for both parties. So they were saying, oh, yeah, well, should he just pay for all these dinners and he's never going to get sex? Or shouldn't he just pay for something cheap like coffee? Wouldn't that be a safer way to date? And then he can get the points of the gesture of paying for the coffee without investing much money if it's not going to turn into sex. And I was just like, wow, this is not our culture here in Crappy Childhood Fairy, that transactional thing about, well, will she trade food for sex? Yeah, I hope none of you have to ever be in such a situation again if you have been. And if you haven't been, right on. And let dating be an opportunity to get to know a human being and see if there's somebody that you would like to be closer to. Like, we've been through so much as traumatized people. The last thing we need is to be, treated transactionally, or like friendly gestures or generosity are, something we have to pay for. Now, I also think, of course, relationships are reciprocal. And of course, at a certain point, both people will be sharing things, but it's not going to be identical in both ways. And I think some sort of cost-benefit analysis makes sense if you're someone who goes on lots and lots of first dates with people who you've met through apps. In which case, coffee. Coffee is very much the place, the thing to do. It's small, it's a low investment, and you can just kind of see, like, is there any kind of attraction here? You can see how people look on a digital profile, but that's a very small piece of what there is to know about the fit or the mutual interest. So coffee, yes, for people doing online dating and dating a lot of people. But if you're sincere that you are interested in this person and you're dating them because you want to see if there's long-term potential, if this could be a marriage, if this could be the beginning of a family, if that's where you're coming from, that really raises the stakes. And the first date, as well as some of the early dates, it's an opportunity to communicate through these old customs, right? And if you introduce too much talk and emphasis on money, it kills the spark. It twists the whole date into something hollow. It can be very disappointing for both people. So it's really wonderful if it's put on the table at first. And if you're the person who does the asking, you can do a favor as say, I'd really like to treat you to dinner. Just like throw those words in so it's known what it's about. And don't play small and not say that I would like to treat you to dinner. Don't avoid saying that, because why would you avoid it? Because you're afraid that they'll go, oh, like a date? No, sorry, ew. Right? That's why you wouldn't say it. But go ahead and get it out there. I'd like to treat you to dinner. Would you be interested in having dinner with me? Yes, you expose yourself to rejection. It's possible. But also, you get the rejection over with, and it's not after a dinner and some awkward thing where you're at the front door and you try to go in for a kiss and it gets completely bizarre, right? So up front, I would recommend. So if you're the person who's getting asked to dinner, you can ask, if they don't tell you what it is. But whatever you do, thinking of people as commodities with probabilities and cost-benefit analysis can easily tip over into dehumanizing for both people. And it's been, I don't know, when did I meet my husband? 17 years ago. So that's the last time I had to get started in a dating relationship. And I know things have changed a lot. All the swiping has appeared since then. And I do, work with and coach a lot of people who are dating, and they always tell me, and part of me thinks, oh, every generation thinks this, but I do think it's harder now. There's a lot of dehumanization, and it's part of social media and part of the apps. And then part of the culture that has been exposed to so much porn, really. I think that it's more and more difficult to draw the line, or to, you have to really express what your boundaries are pretty overtly if you're not into hookup culture. That's what people tell me. And I would have hated that, but I would still, the solution is to be very upfront about what it is you're looking for, what your boundaries are, and then to allow a date to unfold with the dance, okay? Because you're a treasure. You have this thing called troth. Have you ever heard me talk about this? Betrothed means your marriage, your capacity for marriage has been committed to somebody. The wedding hasn't happened yet, but you're betrothed. It's like engaged. So you have this thing to give. You can call it troth. And I always think of it like a little glowing golden ball. You have this thing to give. It's very precious. And you don't want to just like throw it all over town, right? And just be like, oh, I don't know, maybe, yeah, whatever. Even if you're going on dates, even if you're playing things casually for a while, your troth, it should be kept in safekeeping, right? And take it from me as somebody who had a disastrous first marriage. I misplaced my troth for a while. I got it back, but it took a lot of work, and then I could give it again properly. I urge whoever you are, take care with that special light, that golden orb that you have to share with somebody else. It's very precious. It's super valuable. Like if you think about somebody giving that to you one day where they're committed to you, if you're in the hospital, they will be the person who's there with you. If you have an argument, they're there patching things up with you. This is troth. It's something of immense value that we have to share. And it's not given after a first date. It's not given. And it's not given just because people are having sex either. But it often can mislead people into thinking that it's being given. So that's why I really advocate having clear language, clear boundaries, clear sense of what you have, the worth of what you have to give, which there's no exceptions. It's very valuable. And that you keep it in reserve. And then you basically, you're like giving people a little peek of it. If you were to pay for dinner for somebody, you're like, see that? There's my troth. That's it. It's there. You're going to think I'm crazy, right? But I'm not crazy. The first time I ever made a decision, you know what? I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. I'm not paying for first dates anymore. And I wasn't bitchy about it or anything. I just, I don't know. I never had to really experiment with it because the minute I decided I just wasn't going to date guys who thought that was weird. I just thought I'm going to use this one thing. I ended up in like plenty of relationships that went nowhere. And I got some mentoring to help me kind of just be a little more structured about it. If you've taken my dating course, you know I teach structured dating. This is an aspect of structured dating. And like with all the aspects of my structured dating approach, it's all negotiable depending on who you are and who you're dating and what you want. But if you're like a person who was traumatized, you're always going to be so tempted to throw away your standards so that you can have some companionship. Because that is just stripped away. When you're living with the trauma wounds and connection wounds, attachment wounds, the feeling of loneliness and hopelessness can be so painful that it's just like the minute somebody cute shows up, you're just like, yeah, fine, whatever, money, I don't know, boundaries, whatever, you know, I just want you around. And I totally understand that. But as much as we can in order to heal, we want to boundary and structure our dating lives so that they support what we actually want. If we don't stand up for what we actually want, what is desired and what is not okay, nobody does that for you. It would be very rare that somebody would say, listen, I know this isn't what you want, so I'm going to go against what you're saying here. It could happen. It could happen if somebody were very caring and loving and chivalrous. It's not impossible, but I don't think it's a good idea for dating. You want to be the one who's looking out for your boundaries and for what you really want. And you do not have to be embarrassed about what you want. I tell you, the whole time of my dating years, I was embarrassed that I wanted kids and marriage. I always wanted that. I was 3 years old when I sat there and I went, yeah, I really want to get married and have kids. I knew it, you know, as a small kid. It's just how I'm built. And I hid it with guys always because I thought it was uncool, basically. I thought you weren't supposed to have expectations. And I guess I had magical thinking that if I just acted really cool about things and cavalier, they would magically fall for me and they would create that thing. They would make it happen. But isn't that a funny way of actually giving control over to the guy or to whoever the partner is who ends up calling the shots because you don't have boundaries? So you see why I say, you know, whichever role you're in, it's playing small. Oh gosh, these guys who were like saying crappy things to me online, I really doubt that they have real women in their lives because of this way that they're so combative and like, and if that slut thinks she's going to get money out of me, she has another thing coming, you know, just talking like that. And I'm just like, ew. So they must have been burned at some point. And I didn't want to even argue with them about it. It was definitely a no-win situation. So you have this troth to share with somebody else. It's precious. It shouldn't be wasted on people who see you as a parasite or a slut or a gold digger or, a human unit. I think I can say for myself, I used to objectify men back in my dating days. I would just sort of, size them up and be like, are they marriage material? Do I like them? Am I cute? But I was a little slower to heal enough from my trauma wounds to be sensitive to all human beings and sort of see that first. Who is this human being in front of me? To be aware of their sensitivities. Recently, I responded to a letter from a woman. She said, "Oh, these gross guys hit on me." And I was shocked by that. From where I am now in my healing, just like calling people gross who are interested in you. I think it was because they were older. And a lot of people chimed in and they're like, but old men are gross. And it's like, no, they're not. I understand people get drunk and they hit on people who are not interested in them and they can't read the room on it. But people are not inherently gross. And I do see where people are coming from when they say that. And I know that being a young woman, when there's so much like sexual attention and it's so hard to like protect yourself from it, I don't fault anyone if they have to have a pretty harsh view of it right then. But from where I sit now and nobody hits on me and I'm married and, just like all of that is settled and complete. I'm quite free to see that all people are human beings and we want to be kind to them. So that's what it's like to objectify somebody, that they're just for sex or they're a marriage object or something. So a date is where you get to know the human being and you get to listen and pay attention and kind of appreciate their charm, even if you end up not being interested in. Now, my mother's maniacally independent ideals, which she didn't really live up to. I don't think real humans really can live up to this idea that, I'm an island, I don't depend on anybody. It's not really possible or true. I know you can think of exceptions, and people in this audience will, because a lot of people are so wounded from trauma that they're quite invested in finding a way to survive without human assistance. But I wouldn't wish that on anybody, and I don't think it's possible to fully develop as yourself without being in relationship to other people. And I don't just mean romantic relationships. In fact, so often in life, there are no romantic relationships. That's not always part of the equation. But boy, the romantic relationships are definitely where the trauma gets in pretty easy, It can get in anywhere, but you know what I mean. And it gets into the next generation because we have babies and get stuck in these, bad dynamic relationships. So it's really important how we begin a relationship. So what she taught me about independence, it did have some truth in it, but it didn't deal at all with what's really at stake in dating, which is dating and then a romantic relationship and partnership, marriage. It's a portal. It's a platform that enters into, ideally, a secure and fruitful life. Now, it's possible to have a secure and fruitful life single. It's possible to have no fruit and no security in a relationship. But I'm talking about like our intent of what we're trying to create when we come together with somebody romantically. Why we're created with so much romantic and sexual energy and drive is to form that secure and fruitful life. And sometimes the fruitfulness involves children, and sometimes it's creativity, and sometimes it's playing a role in life as a couple that's generous towards others, that gives them a place to stay or comforts them or welcomes them, or assists them, or creates a business. There's so many ways that people can be fruitful. But at the center of that is forming a family. And the mysterious male-female dynamic that must be allowed to activate and play out for the potential of the match to be revealed. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We go through this ritual so that the dynamic that is conventionally, traditionally male-female, it plays out in other forms of relationships as well sometimes, but it activates the romantic energy and shows you the potential of the match. That potential is revealed in the energy of the dynamic that you experience in early dates. Now, are you sensitive enough to perceive what it's telling you? Probably not if you're traumatized. Are you impaired in the ability to see red flags? Probably, if you've been traumatized. So that's why I feel that these rituals are especially important. Even though it's hard for us to read signals sometimes or perform signaling, it's hard for us to do. It's better than doing nothing and just winging it and being cool girl or nice guy and just like, oh yeah, whatever, I'll put up with anything because I like you. What we want to know in a date is this the person? Is this the one person who could go the distance with me? Is it them? And so how do you discern that? By taking time to get to know them. And while the rest of the world can do hookup culture and sleep together immediately, or after 3 dates or whatever, 3 dates is nothing in my experience. It doesn't tell you enough at all. And there's no commitment. There may be a time longer than that suits you. It was certainly a long time for me when I finally figured out how much I just was like throwing myself off a cliff again and again by rushing into relationships. So granted, I was raised by alcoholic hippies, and that's not so helpful for a lot of things that you would want to know in terms of how to date and how to form a relationship. No one went the distance with anyone in my family. All relationships fell apart. And because the, pay for your own dinner idea was drilled into me, it echoed through my whole life. And yeah, it was with everybody I dated. It was in my marriage. It led very quickly to the hard road of being a single mom afterwards, with lots of arguing and stuff. We're friends now, good friends. And we were able to, with the use of the daily practice, which he ended up also adopting after we split up. The daily practice is the set of techniques I teach for re-regulating your nervous system so you can sort of have like truthful eyes to see and ears to hear, and to be able to discern what's right in front of you and release a lot of the anger that might be projected on the other person. In the case of my first marriage, it was wrong for us to be married, even though we had kids, and it was right for us to separate. It was more peaceful and harmonious. But that's not a fun thing to face. It was a mistake to get married, but I never would say that because it resulted in the 2 young men I love most in the whole wide world, and they're so awesome. So I accept my path. It was all good, but it was really, really hard. And it took a lot out of me to be in a bad marriage and to fight all the time and to struggle for every little bit of respect that I hope to be given, So rarely, if ever, in my life did men pay for my dinner. And if they did, it made me feel uncomfortable. And paying half was a way for me to feel less awkward and a little bit less like everything was out of control. It helped me to not feel foolish. But it didn't tend to lead to anything solid. And mostly the relationships I had fell together without actually dating. We'd hang out for a while and then we were sleeping together and then whatever, I guess we're in a relationship. Even if I didn't want to be in the relationship, I couldn't leave because my abandonment wounds were too strong. So I'd spend a lot of time there and I'd be there until they left. And then, it was just all quite heartbreaking. And these disappointments continued for a long time, honestly. And I wanted marriage and family the whole time. And then everything changed. And one thing, not the only thing that changed it was, I embraced the radical idea that the old gender roles, for me as a straight woman, that the old gender roles, as oppressive as they could sometimes prove to be, they certainly sometimes were for me, are nonetheless real in their essence, especially in certain situations, dating. And that reality is the only place where love and harmony can happen. And so if the gender roles are actually not your vibe, then they're not going to work. They're not going to work. But I was fairly aligned with the traditional female role, but because of survival, I had to work with a lot of male energy to get by. And a lot of people say I still have a lot of that. And then other people just say I'm a stupid woman. So whatever, I know who I am. It's a sweet part of life sometimes to feel a little bit sheltered, a little bit taken care of, even though, the rest of the day and most days I'm out here, doing crappy childhood fairy, running the business, paying the bills, taking care of things, repairing things. And my husband does things that are a little more on the masculine side. So we have a lot of flexibility about who does what. But there was this fundamental harmony that I felt with him in the way that he was willing to step up and play that role with me and let me just kind of relax a little bit. And I could remember just a couple times in my life where I kind of accidentally happened into that feeling. It was like a peaceful, like I can just kind of like relax for a little bit feeling. So I'm probably, a lot of this, it's really hard to say how much of it is subjective to my life. I had a fairly hard life. I had to work very hard. It's really nice when somebody takes care of me, but a little too much of that, and I hate it. I'm just like, oh, stop analyzing me, or, I can do it. And it's part of my trauma wound that it's kind of hard for me to align like that. So when you find harmony with somebody where you can kind of slide into your roles together and allow someone to take care of you a little bit, it's a filter, right? So today's my birthday. As I'm taping this, I just turned 62. And, I'm an advice columnist on YouTube, basically, in effect. I'm not a therapist, but I do mentor a lot of people on how to make life better, despite growing up neglected, abused, having to fend for yourself all the time. So I speak from my experience, and I do a lot of research on what's common, and I learn so much from the community here about how it all plays out in your lives. And in this audience, I would say almost everybody has attachment wounds. And from what I can tell from the comments and the letters I get, and it makes people prone to rush into relationships and then get devastated when the emotional or literal unavailability of the person becomes obvious. And it's very hard to see in advance. But sometimes it's like they're with you, but they're emotionally unavailable. And sometimes it's like they are not available. They've moved away. They're married to somebody else, whatever it is. They're on drugs. It's very painful to not be able to filter yourself, to not be able to refrain from getting all involved and emotionally dependent on somebody who cannot and will not be with you. That's a lot where we see limerence kind of come rising up and get very strong. We see love where there is no love. And when it becomes obvious and that lack of two-sided love wrecks everything, those attachment wounds are then going to make it really, really hard for the hurt person to let go. So years of our lives can be made miserable this way for both parties. And the reason I strongly recommend that women allow men to pay during early dates, unless that's like really not your jam, fine. But if this appeals to you, consider it. Just like sit on your hands or have the conversation and maybe wait to date a man who says, I'd like to take you out. Wait for that and have that experience for yourself. Let yourself see what that does for what happens afterwards. How does the match align? How are you able to discern more about this human being you're trying to get to know? Is this ancient tradition of courtship powerful for you to help move things along and make things clearer about the potential of the relationship? And it allows men to demonstrate that they are into you. You can fake it, but if a guy won't pay, I would say I look back and I'm like, yeah, it was always a red flag that they weren't that into me, or they were too concerned about like getting ripped off by me for their interest in me to be stronger than that, right? So apologies if this is not true for you. I always say you're going to have to interpret this information for yourself. It allows men to demonstrate that they're into you and that they're capable of chivalry. And, as somebody who's had a couple kids, and I had those kids within a very difficult marriage, I can't tell you how much chivalry means to me. When I am not fully capable of protecting myself and taking care of myself and the kids, to have somebody there stepping in for me is one of the most healing and powerful energies in the universe. And I'm very grateful for it. And I wish I could go back and tell myself, like, don't diss that energy. Don't make fun of it. It's not 1950s. It's a very necessary and beautiful thing. And it's something that you want, Anna Runkle. You want that. You want somebody capable of giving that. Having that energy present, available, is important in any relationship, especially if marriage and kids are in the cards. And yeah, I know people can fake it, but you can deny this basic reality that sometimes somebody has to be, chivalrous. You can deny it at your own peril. I think it would be a sad relationship if it was always like tit for tat. Now you have cancer and I didn't get cancer, so I don't have to take care of you. Oh, woe to the person who ends up in that situation. So I was 45 years old, and then I learned to wait for the guy to ask me, and only one guy ever did, and it's my now husband. And it's just weird how it just, it changed the dynamic. It shut the gate on anything else happening that was beneath that. And we had our share of problems. We had our share of doubts and one person hurting the other and thinking maybe it's no good. It's not like it's a cure-all or anything, but it just kind of set the tone. And one of the things that's helped me to stay like romantically into him all these years is the feeling of that energy in him. It's an energy, that I guess ideally we get it from our parents, right? And for me, it was my dad. He had that energy for me. And then I got taken away from him when I was 9. And then he died. And so I think a lot of my missteps in relationships were like questing for that energy, but I just had bad information. Like, you actually can have that energy. You can. You might have to wait for it. It doesn't come every day, and not everybody wants to give it to you. But if you're careful with that golden light of truth inside yourself, and you get to know people first, you can end up landing where somebody is giving you that truth right back, and in that type of energy that feels just like very harmonious for your being and helps you become a little bit of a better version of yourself, a little more capable of playing your role in the relationship, whatever that is. One of the wisest pieces of advice I ever got was that a sign that somebody is the right one is that you find yourself, not like beating yourself up, you find yourself just becoming a better version of yourself. And if you're like me, you've had the experience of becoming a worse version of yourself. You just become downtrodden, depressed, kind of like unhinged in a relationship that's not right. But when it has enough of the right elements in it, and again, nobody's perfect, but when the basic ingredients are there, you find yourself stepping up and becoming a better version of yourself. And in that sense, it's like, a chord is a minimum of 3 notes, dun, 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 and they create a harmony together. A chord is more than the sum of the 3 parts. And I think that's what romantic harmony is like. You both become a little more than you were by yourself. And I think that's why so many of us can't stop longing for a good love relationship, even when it's been a hard road. And I really encourage you, if it's your heart's desire to have a relationship like that, don't let it go. Don't denigrate that desire. If you desire it, it's almost certainly what you're meant to have. Now, are we capable of it? It takes growth. It takes so much personal growth to be capable of it, especially if you have years behind you, as I did, of, just like weird choices, sad choices, things that left me broke and sorry I'd ever gotten into the whole situation in the first place. So sometimes we have to really focus on changing our ways. But that's, to not change this pattern is the ultimate playing small. There are few mistakes that we make in life that can create ripple effects for as long as getting involved with somebody who's just no good for you. So play big, my friends, and honor yourself and what you have to give. Consider playing traditional roles when you date. And if you want to hear more about this, I talk about it in my dating course. I would definitely encourage you to check that out. In fact, I'll leave you with it right here. And I will see you very soon.